Total radioactive shit factor in the oceans primarily, but also on land and the air and where it was dumped. This can be anything from the first atom bombs going off in Japan that were intentionally set off and the total fallout effect, or all the nuclear plants dumping crap, every mining operation counted in, the tailings, the processing waste material, the refined material, and then finally the highly refined material to make nuclear power plant material to drive them, or make atom bombs, and the waste material done for each of these stages, as well as depleted uranium from nuclear plants and depleted uranium or other materials in atom bombs that eventually stop being effective. This will also consider that we must cumulatively understand that certain atoms that become radioactive isotopes because a neutron is added or subtracted, or it was born that way, radioactive, have a half-life, which means they can have a really long half-life but put off diddly squat or put off a lot of radiation. It really does depend. Or have a really short half-life and the same thing. They could put off a lot of radiation or none. The type of radiation, whether or not the radioactive material really emits anything that can even go through skin, or whether it goes straight through you. Whether or not it releases enough of a type of radiation that it would simply kill a cell, causing acute, not chronic, but acute radiation poisoning, and then have no effect afterwards because it's killed the cell rather than causing it to be damaged enough to become cancerous. In the same way that marijuana is less cancer-causing because it kills lung cells instead of just damaging them like cigarettes. It doesn't cure cancer. It just kills cells entirely instead of wounding them. No, it doesn't make you healthier. Stop that lie. Thank you. We're going to compare the totals for radioactivity in a unit called becquerels, or what I like to call radioactive shit factor, shit factor. In ocean weapons testing fallout, the fallout and immediate effects from Chernobyl versus Fukushima, and the effect in poundage or tonnage or kilograms compared to a single canister of radioactive waste. Now that's a hard unit to use, but instead of becquerels, which are measured as 4 times 10 to the 15th power becquerels, we're going to call that a barrel full as 1 barrel, or 4 units, because all the units below are adjusted for times 10 to the 15th power, so that we don't have an apples to orange comparison. We have a barrel to barrel comparison. Since all of the units are based, at least where I looked them up and was able to adjust for them, times 10 to the 15th power becquerels, we can eliminate that entire slew of crap and make a unit. Now you can just decide that the barrel has 4 units of radioactive shit factor, and just decide that all the others should be based on that, and I would just say divide them by 4 and you end up with the correct answer. Because we're doing a comparison to actual radioactive waste dumped into the environment in a barrel or container, we should know how much it is. It's 400 kilograms of radioactive vitrified high-level waste. You can look up what that means exactly, but the point is that's the unit that we're using because that's the shipping unit. The amount that was considered financially cheap for a country or a business to transport it a distance they felt was acceptable to get rid of the crap by dumping it into the ocean, a hole in the ground, a river, a stream, or a lake. And I'm going to reveal not just that this came from Wikipedia, but where Wikipedia got it from at the end, so that you can sit there and backspace all the caps locking you've already started doing without listening. Now, the upper level on the total radioactive effect, or shit factor, is 45 units. The lowest end is 4, so 10 to 1 ratio, almost. Now, I'm going to use the lower unit for 2 reasons. One, because everyone uses this incredibly minuscule unit called becquerel to make impressive, scary-sounding numbers out of the equivalent to this much radioactive material. Granted, if you take that much material and spread it over a football field, it is actually a significant toxic waste dump kind of thing. But you're still intentionally hiding this. If you measure the length of your finger in micrometers, it's an enormous number. But it didn't make your finger any longer. So we're going to use a unit that we can understand. 1 barrel of crap. Now remember, this is radioactive material. It tends to be pretty dense. 400 kilograms of material. Let's continue. So it's anywhere from 40 to 45 units for a barrel. So let's go on to how many barrels worth each measurement was done, and I'm going to reveal by who. TEPCO versus the French Nuclear Safety Committee has a very different idea on how much radioactive effect all of those tons of radioactive material that ended up getting into the environment from the Fukushima accident exactly was. This is leaked and dumped material, depending on which way you look it up. The loaded wording and language is very interesting in each. 5 units to 27 units. The worst case scenario is 27 units. That's for 300 tons of radioactive water that was either dumped into the environment or, suspiciously, for the entire time this is supposed to have been happening, there's a bunch of on-site tanks at Fukushima collecting it. That's almost exactly that amount per day. But we're going to say it's 27 units or 5 units. That works out to 7 barrels worth, worst case scenario. That's me using the weakest barreled unit to get a very fine grain number. It's also a scary number, but it gives us a finer grain number. Otherwise it would say 1 barrel or half a barrel. No, we don't round it off that way. We're going to use the lower number and call it 7 barrels worth. Yeah, that's the entire amount of radioactive material because it was diluted in water, because it's water. It's not mostly sludge. Everybody that says it was sludge, no, it was actually water. It looks like you could drink it. That's why they stored it, because they don't want you drinking it. What about the Fukushima disaster itself? 80% of this fell into the ocean, or you can't have your lie about the west coast of the United States or just your house being irradiated, Kevin. That's the equivalent to around 195 barrels. It's anywhere from 340 units to 780 units. Let's use the worst case scenario. I'm not going to reveal the sources. And we're going to use the smallest radiation value for the barrel so we get a fine grain and scary number of 195 barrels worth of shit. Please look up the average shipment of barrels dumped overboard in the ocean by the Russian government and where. I'll get to that in a minute. Next. Chernobyl disaster. It's equivalent to 3,000 barrels. Yeah, Fukushima is not as bad. That's the total output. And 80% of it landed on the ground because the radioactive elements are heavy. They tend to fall down. It's a fallout incident. Pure fallout. Dirty bomb mode. 3,000 barrels worth. That's at least 10 times as bad, right? And Fukushima, on their own merits, specific, telling you this, dead ass, almost 200 barrels worth. And worst case scenario by a specific source, 27 barrels worth, no, 7 barrels worth into the ocean, dumped sludge. No, it was just water was contaminated. Global fallout of all the nuclear weapons tests combined, 740,000 barrels. Yes, I'm organizing this by what is the worst source of radioactive material. We've been detonating nuclear warheads in the air and in the ocean. This is the effect that's measured. Because you can look up and find the radiation level before tests and after by checking silt layers, and also because, and this is kind of funny, the United States government tested the becquerel levels before they set these off. Also, I don't know if you know this, but the United States government detonated atomic warheads in the United States. There's a map below in the description you can link to that shows you where the radiation landed. The United States has experienced the equivalent to a nuclear war. Less radiation has been dumped on Japan by bombing them than we did by bombing ourselves. There's also explosions set off over the ocean and in the ocean, which meant that it fell onto the ocean, mostly, and sank to the bottom, mostly, and then diluted what didn't fall on the ocean bottom. And you can actually go down to that layer and find it and test it. It's incorporated in the corals. And again, you can just drill down and find out what the actual radiation levels were and check the half-lives, because the naturally occurring potassium 40 in all the oceans total can also be measured, and it's 3.5 million barrels worth before all of this. And has had very little change because, again, all of the weapons tests and everything would amount to maybe 500,000. So 3 million before versus 7 barrels of shit, or 200 barrels of shit from Fukushima and 3,000 barrels of shit from Chernobyl, and all of the nuclear weapons tests being over 500,000 barrels worth of shit, or the 3.5 million barrels of shit we started off with. Diluting in the oceans versus the meme that it was aimed at your house because you want to have a YouTube channel complaining about it, Kevin, or some other asshole lying about the entire coastline of Oregon, Washington, California, being targeted somehow by something that spreads out and takes years to get here, by a dilution factor that also takes into account that some of these things had very short half-lives. They may have been radioactively crazy dangerous, but the half-life is short enough that they drop every 10 half-lives by 1,000 to 1, and every 20 half-lives by 1 million to 1. But somehow we only use the number from when it started rather than the 1 million to 1 level it gets to, or the 1 billion to 1 ratio it gets to by the time it reaches the west coast of the United States. Some elements that are radioactive decay so rapidly they're undetectable 10 minutes after they form from an atom bomb going off. Others take decades or millennia. And the ones that have very long decay times sometimes have very little radiation unless you're really close to them. The effect is important, and so is the timing. The naturally occurring potassium-40, an element that would be absorbed by human beings on a regular basis because potassium does get absorbed by your body, that gets into the water, that's in the oceans, that's in the sea food you eat. Yeah. 14 million times 10 to the 15th power becquerels, or 3.5 million barrels worth of shit. That's the entire video. So what are the sources I used? Well, I used Wikipedia, of course, because that pisses people off. What did Wikipedia use? Oh, a bunch of news sources and reports. Where did they get the information from? Oh, a bunch of scientific papers. What were the science papers about? Actual measurements. Was there any bias in these? Yeah. They were done by brainies that are against nuclear power. The people you're disagreeing with right now while you're cat typing are the people who are on your side. But let's keep using becquerels instead of barrelfuls because that makes it really, really easy to look up. Of course, I could be lying about this. It would only take a person... Gee, there's people out there who are willing to literally fake a September 11th Building 7 video by adding in explosion sounds and flashes, and then admit it later because they were trolling the shit out of 9/11 truthers. And there's also 9/11 truthers who did exactly the same dead-ass thing by changing the frame rate and altering the video. There are people out there who are willing to go to a Herculean amount of effort to lie about this being urine instead of some fucking orange-flavored fruit drink, and then pour it on you and say it's rain. But they're not willing to go double-check the links I leave in every video because they don't give a fuck about why I'm saying what I'm doing or if it's factual. Only that it sounds like I'm arguing with them. What countries are the worst polluters concerning dumping? Russia, 40 units. UK, 35 units. Switzerland, 4 units. USA, 3 units. Belgium, 2 units worth of the same thing in becquerels times 10 to the 15th power. Where did Russia dump at least a good portion of it? 12 sites in the Pacific Ocean off the Sea of Japan. Please tell me why the fuck I'm supposed to listen to Fukushima fuckheads in the description below. And again, you have to double check whether or not I got this from a bunch of tree huggers.